Hello and welcome back to part 2 of this week. If you missed part 1, go back because this will have much more context and you'll be able to follow along and see how all of the pieces of this series fit together. So today we are talking about money. I'm going to be sharing some of my findings, things that I did that worked, some that maybe didn't, questions that I was thinking about. And that sense with money, when you know you need to step it up a little bit. And I've always been afraid, we're going straight there. I've always been afraid of not fulfilling my own potential. And I really dislike that feeling in myself when I've maybe not delivered what I know I'm capable of, or it just didn't go well on the day, or whatever, or I said the wrong thing, or, I was doing any of the things that we all do as imperfect human beings. But I've had times in my career over the last 25 years where it's almost felt like I was playing a computer game and I got to the end of a path and there was a brick wall. And I have to make a decision, like, where am I going? What's happening? And I touched on it briefly yesterday. I was thinking about having another baby and adding to my family. And there were some things that were okay and essentially kind of workable and acceptable with one child. But there was something about having another one where I was thinking, this is not going to work. You're just making it work here. But if you want that, you're going to have to do this. And this brings me on to the first thing. I had to really pay attention to my relationship with money in terms of the short term and the long term, and set my own success expectations and what this would mean. And this is so important, whatever stage of business that you're at. We can all compare ourselves. And I think the 90s path that was laid out for lots of us, certainly when I was at school, of what success looked and felt like was, a house, a partner, kids, this kind of holiday, 2 cars on the drive, money for an extension, which was a conservatory. This was sort of what I was fed. And for me, it's much more nuanced. And the list of my own success is different in that way to lots of people. And I really was at that stage. And I guess this was when I was going back to the dreaming of, like, what makes me happy? And often it wasn't, I want to get a bigger car, or I want to buy a designer handbags. And again, this was the narrative that was being fed. And I was looking at different things, such as, I guess we knew we wanted to move house. So that was in the back of my mind. But ultimately in that stage, I wanted choice. I wanted flexibility, and they were the key drivers. And I'm not saying if you have a portfolio career that provides choice and flexibility, I'm not saying you can't therefore make lots of money. You can, but they were my drivers at that point. And I think as I was embarking upon potentially having a baby and getting pregnant again and going through all that, knowing what I had gone through with my son, I wasn't thinking perhaps about the jazzy consumerism of Instagram. I wasn't going, oh my gosh, I've got to have all of these nursery aesthetic. You know how it was at that time? It was very stylized. It was very perfect. You had to have this kind of bag doing whatever. And I had to keep going back to, what do I want in short term and what do I want long term? So we knew we wanted to move, and we didn't actually end up moving till 2022. So quite a few years later. But there was that sense of that's in the long term. So thinking about that then, but also in the short term, I wanted to enjoy my daughter in those first months, have that moment of going from 1 to 2 children and embedding all of that and making it work and not being stressed. And I think paying attention to what you want is some of the best work that you can do, because it's so easy to get swept away between people saying, well, I've got 2 cars, or we've just come back from skiing, or all those sorts of things. And you can easily go into comparisonitis of like, but I haven't taken my kid to Disney World. Am I failing? Have I done something wrong here? And you have to go back to what works for you. So, number 2, the next thing I started to do was go out. Go out to events. I sometimes took my son, but actually for me, it was better if I got to have the opportunity to not take my son. Mainly because I really struggled to do all of the things, to pay attention to his needs, to be in the conversation, to finish a sentence, to do all of that. So I really started to try and separate my work and my life, and that was easier at that stage. So I joined a members club, I did lots of my sessions there, and I really saw a spike in my business that attracted more speaking events, more going to places. And again, when you're live with people, that's when things begin to move and shake, and it was fantastic. So, however great online is, I would always encourage you to make sure that you are having real life conversations. And I know for some of you introverts, you might be thinking, no thanks, that doesn't feel good. But you have to make sure, whatever your personality type, there is some kind of mechanism that is moving along, that is building that side of your business, the connection, the growth, the relationships. That's so important. Number 3, I really tightened things up online, and I really began to push the things that, push sounds like a bit like that's not, delight, the online side of my business. Building out courses, figuring out, even though at times with the technology at that time, I wanted to pull my hair out because I was like, I can't get the thing to connect with the thing. I persevered so much. I also invested in myself, people who had experience with the digital side of business. I really got to know it, and I learned it like a student, a really diligent, sometimes frustrated student. But that allowed that side of my business to grow again and again. And it took time. It all takes time. And I know some people come up with their $1 million idea in a weekend, and then suddenly they are making $250,000 2 weeks later. That's great. But equally at that time, 100 quid here, 250 quid here, while I'm in Sainsbury's buying like that kind of money coming into my business, when essentially that was coming from something I've created over here. That was life-changing for me. That was incredible. Number 4, I really saw and noticed the relationship with money. And I remember around that time doing a course, and it was a stretch. It was like the next stretch for me at the time, and I ummed and ahed, and I was like, I don't know if I should be doing this, and it felt scary, it felt edgy. Equally, I knew I needed to do it. If I wanted to go to the next level, I had to learn this. I needed to see what was going on. And I did the payment plan of this. And then 2 years later, I signed up for a year-long coaching relationship program. And I, again, did the payment plan. I can't remember what the first thing was, but the year-long thing was £750 a month. So $9,000 in total, something like that. And because I paid that every single month, and that then took me into COVID and the year of 2020, there was something about paying that every single month, which meant I showed up with my full chest, not maybe my full chest, but like I gave it everything I had consistently because I'd signed up for that payment plan. And that was such a learning. Like, it's really easy. Well, it's not easy. It's what's the word that I'm looking for? If you've got that money, you can drop the money on the thing that you want to buy. But who are you? Are you the person that then does the work? So I've heard it so often, these people who say, yeah, I bought that course, but I've never opened it. I've heard it in Facebook groups all the time. And I just think, wow, to have money that you're not valuing or you're not doing the work. And of course, there's other things that go on sometimes. I'm always curious about what that looks and feels like. And I've known that doing a payment plan for me has helped me to keep going back. Go back. Okay, you're here again. You're doing the work. You're doing the thing. So equally, it's easy to pay for a gym membership for a year all in one go. But are you going to go? Are you going to go 3 months later, 6 months later, 7? What's happening on month 9? What's going on? Whereas there's something energetically about paying every single month that keeps you in the game. With that, as an addition, have you thought about this in terms of your clients? Is there a way that people can be on some kind of payment plan or direct debit or something like that? Because it means that they're in the game, they're doing it, or more likely to be in the game. Have a think about that in terms of your pricing and packaging. It's also really great for cash flow as well. Number 5, I became so good, and this was not something that happened automatically overnight. I knew it was a weakness in myself, and I worked on it, and I worked on it so hard. I became really good at talking about money. I also became great at asking the right questions and communicating and being in conversation about money. And this has been a habit that I've picked up, but it became my identity. When I moved to London, I was so grateful to be in the room. I couldn't believe it. Like, I got a job 5 months early out of drama school. I left early. I couldn't believe that I didn't even have to finish my 3rd year. I was off to the races. I was out and about. And I picked up this, I almost felt like it was a fluke, or I just got really lucky, or I better be grateful because this might be the last job. And I became that person. And actually, what I didn't recognize was my talent and my hard work was getting me into those rooms. So I was worthy to be in that space. I'd earned my place. It wasn't like somebody had just gifted it to me. I had done the work. And over the years, I noticed that I had been skirting around this conversation of money. And I also noticed that people were getting paid more than me. And there were a couple of instances where I just thought, hang on a minute, this doesn't feel good anymore. Something needs to change. I also then had a few positive things where I had some really positive money stories. And I had to come to the conclusion, well, if that can happen once, it can happen again and again. And there was so much money work around that time. There was a great book that I read. I'm going to write it because I want to write it in the show notes as well, just as I'm talking to you. I read Jen Sincero's You're a Badass at Making Money. And that book, it shook me. It nudged me. It gave me the pep talk that I needed it. And it was one of those life-changing books where I had to look hard at myself and go, what's going on here? Because again, you can blame other things or other people or the market or whatever, but I was the common denominator. And at this point, this is when I really started taking responsibility for what was going on. Come back for part 3 tomorrow. If you want to find out more about money stuff, go to the description below. There are loads of resources to get stuck into.